Hi, Dr. Russ here. Let's get paid and stay out of trouble. Episode 1, Patient Files. I am Dr. David Russ. I am a chiropractor. I've been practicing in Portland, Oregon since 1998. In addition to clinical practice, I'm also an educator. I have this educational YouTube channel. I've led lots of workshops. I have taught at massage schools, chiropractic schools, naturopathic schools. From 2013 to 2019, I was on the peer review committee for the Oregon Board of Chiropractic Examiners. I saw hundreds of patient files from dozens of doctors. I've seen lots of different things. I've also done medical legal consultation when lawyers want a chiropractor to look at a patient file from a personal injury claim or a malpractice claim, and they want to know, is this up to standard of practice? Are there big holes in this file, etc. So I have a lot of experience looking at patient files. I think it's a very, very important subject. I congratulate you for taking time out of your life to watch a YouTube about patient files. You want it to be good. You want your practice to be safe for you and for your patients. You want it to be worry-free. And so your documentation will help you with that tremendously over the course of your career. If you're in school now or you're just getting started, starting off on the right foot is enormous. If you've been in practice for a while and you realize you can do better and you want to know how, this video is for you. And I recommend you start tomorrow. If you were to get into some administrative trouble because your past files were not good, but you could demonstrate that your files are better now, that would go a long way toward alleviating your troubles. If you're just getting started and you're choosing an EHR system, the decision that you make, this will be one of the first big decisions that you make for your practice. So I would like for you to be able to evaluate these practice management software and EHR software based on these criteria. What do you really need? Now, why is this so important? Why are files so important? Mainly because it represents you in case of any malpractice, any legal trouble, or any administrative trouble. So the difference is if there's a malpractice suit brought against you or you do injure someone, that's legal trouble. That's a civil suit, it's legal trouble. Lawyers, judges, stuff like that. If you get in trouble with the board, that's not legal trouble, that's administrative trouble. It's also trouble. It can be a big headache and really costly in terms of time and money and effort and brain space. So having good documentation will make any legal or administrative trouble a lot less trouble. It also represents your patients in any personal injury dispute they may come up against. So what am I talking about? Let's say you've got this patient, as many of us do, who you treat periodically for neck and shoulder tension. They work on a computer, they're stressed out, whatever it may be. It's showing up as tension and pain and stiffness in their neck, and they're otherwise healthy. So you treat them every so often, you help them out, and you record that in your file. Your file reflects what you're doing and why. And let's say one day they get rear-ended at a stoplight, and now they have a neck injury as a result of that motor vehicle crash. And their car insurance will pay for their care. Their car insurance can also ask you for their prior records because the car insurance people want to know, is the care that this patient is getting as a result of the car accident, or is it the result of something that has been going on for them for a long time? So if your file accurately represents what you've been doing with them, which is just basic routine care for neck tension related to computer work, and your file reflects professionalism and credibility on your part, your patient will have no problem, and you will have no problem getting paid for the care that they need for their car accident. If your file doesn't do those things, if it doesn't reflect credibility and professionalism, and it doesn't accurately describe what you were doing with and for the patient, and maybe it might overstate what the patient was dealing with before, that's going to be trouble for your patient. So it's important. It's really the only representation of your practice that most people will ever see. That's insurance payers and the people who review claims at insurance payers, other providers. So patient comes in, I see them every so often for their low back. One day they come in, they say, Dr. Russ, my knee, something's wrong with my knee. I look at it and I'm like, oh boy, this looks like an ACL tear. I'm going to refer them to the knee doctor that I work with. And along with the referral will be my notes. And that doctor will look at my notes and make judgments, right or wrong, about me and my practice and my credibility and my professionalism based on what they see in those notes. I want all the orthopedic surgeons, I want all the neurologists, I want everyone in Portland to think, when they think Dr. Russ, they think good doctor. And part of that comes from the notes that I send with my patients when I send referrals. It's important. And it really helped me build my practice, and it can help you build your practice too. I've had some of these neurologists and surgeons and folks come to me as patients or send their family to me as patients because my notes have created a good impression on them. Sometimes your notes will wind up in the hand of lawyers who are going to be looking for any mistakes you may have made with a very critical eye. They're not interested in making you look good. They're interested in making you look bad. Don't give them any opportunities to do that. It might wind up in the hands of judges or juries. This is very unlikely unless you specifically have a practice that is geared toward personal injury and those difficult long-term cases, but it may happen. State board reviewers, like I was, they might request your file. If a patient makes a complaint about me, the first thing the Oregon Board of Chiropractic Examiners will do is request the patient's file. And even if the patient's complaint turns out to be without merit, if my documentation is bad, I could get in trouble separately for that. Even though the initial complaint didn't have merit, if the documentation I send them is substandard, I'm going to get in trouble for that. It's an opportunity for us to present ourselves professionally to the rest of the world. So reflect well on you, reflect well on the whole profession. You want to have your patient file to be complete. And completeness is basically the subject of this video. We'll be talking about completeness the whole time. It needs to be legible. And with EHR these days, there's no reason for a file to be illegible. There's no reason for you to be using pen and paper anymore. If you still are, it's time to change. Your file needs to be organized so that anyone reading it can make sense of what's happening. There's a flow to it. And again, your EHR program will do that unless it's really not good, but it needs to be able to do that. And by the way, it's 100% okay to start your practice with something very basic and bare bones, as long as it provides you with a complete, legible, organized file that is easy to retrieve. Someone asks you for the file, someone who has a legal right to the file and the patient's permission, you should be able to produce it really quickly. With EHR programs, it really should be just a few clicks to create a PDF, and you should be ready to send that out. Anytime you get a valid records request that is accompanied by the patient's signature on that request, just fulfill it right away. Don't procrastinate that. Don't let that sit on your desk. Just do those same day. Number one, it'll ease your mind. And number two, it reflects good. It reflects well on you. It reflects well on your practice. And treat every file as if it will be requested at some point. The next thing I need to say is never falsify your records. It's not worth it. If something is wrong, if something is bad, if it's not up to standard, that's what it is, and it's requested, just send it. Don't go back and modify it. Don't try to fluff it up. Don't try and add pages to it. I've seen this. It's very easy to spot, and that's big trouble. That's much bigger trouble than just not having a good file. Especially like if I send a file from 6-7 years ago and my records are better now and the file they get is not good and I get some feedback about that or some administrative trouble about that, I can demonstrate my files are better now, my practices are better now. How do you legally and ethically modify a record? Because sometimes records do need to be amended and updated. You do it by, number one, leaving the original entry legible. So it's just one line through. You're not scribbling it out. You're not removing pages. It's one line through. It's a date and your initials on the modifications, and you're explaining why you modified. So you can go back and cross out a sentence and date and initial it and write in the new information and say this new information came to light, or I remembered something later, or edited for accuracy. It can just say edited for accuracy because we're all human. We all make mistakes. It's okay to go back and correct a mistake as long as you leave the original there. That's above board, modifying the file. Everyone knows who did it. Everyone knows why. You're not trying to hide anything. You just want the record to be correct. So what goes into a complete file? The patient's demographic information, which is their name, their address, their phone number, their date of birth, their gender, stuff like that. The intake forms, and a lot of today's video is going to be about what should they be, what should they have. A detailed SOAP for every encounter. Every time you see that patient, you do detailed documentation on that, and you put it in the file, and it stays in chronological order. It doesn't have to be in SOAP format. Point and click is perfectly fine as long as it's accurate and as long as the subjective, objective, assessment and plan elements are in there. It can be in whatever format you want as long as it's organized and legible. Your diagnoses will be in the file. The treatment you gave will be in the file, and we'll talk about in another video how to document diagnoses and treatment verbally and also with codes, because you need to do codes. Any correspondence you have with the patient, text, email, copy and paste it into their file. If it's a phone call, just a couple sentences about the date of the call and what you talked about and maybe how long you talked. It should be in there. And finally, any reports on x-rays or MRIs or labs, it should all be in their file. It's nice to spell out your clinical reasoning, and here's why. One of the standards in Oregon for a good file, a good complete file legally, is that another doctor could open it up, read it, and could tell what was going on. Someone with your similar training. So if you're an AK doctor, another AK doctor could read your file and understand it and pick up and continue care should that be necessary. Should something happen to me and I can't practice tomorrow, someone should be able to, with similar training, come in and see what I was doing with each patient that's on my schedule, and they can have the continuity of care. Why did I do what I did? What tests did I do and why? What were my contraindications? What did I hope to accomplish? What were my treatment goals? And how did I know that what I did worked? Those are all really nice to have in a file and makes your file just like that extra mile of really, really good. So what about the intake? What needs to be in the intake in order for it to be legally compliant? And that's what we're going for, is legal compliance. The patient identifiers, their demographics, their name, their contact information, their date of birth. Number 2, informed consent. Did you give the patient the information about what was going to happen? Did you give them the opportunity to ask questions and say yes or no? Number 3 is the HIPAA. That's the privacy form, federally required. Number 4 is all their health information, their chief complaint, their past history. And number 5 is a financial agreement. Let's talk about their contact information, their demographics, their legal name, what's on their birth certificate, what's on their driver's license. They may go by a different name, and that's totally fine, but we do need their legal name, their date of birth, their contact information. This brings up the topic of gender. I know it's really important to some people that they identify their own gender. And here in Portland, we come across that a lot. I take people as they come. You are who you say you are when you come into my practice. My EHR requires me to choose a gender on the binary, male or female. It won't save your file unless I have one. Again, my work does not depend on the gender. It's not relevant to the body work. I'm not going to be working around genitals. I'm not going to be touching breasts. So the patient's gender is not important. Their biological sex is not important. It's important to them. If something that we're doing, somehow we're doing some lab work or there's some hormonal issues, then we may need to know about their biological sex and then we'll talk about it. But what if the patient's identification is not binary? Male, they're not male or female, or it's fluid. Sometimes they're one, sometimes they're the other. they get to choose. They get to tell me what to put. I really don't care. I know from my experience that their biological sex matching the gender on my intake form is never going to get anybody into any trouble at all. It doesn't matter, okay? Pick one. If they ask, which has only happened twice, I say put what's on your driver's license or what's on your birth certificate. Beyond that, it doesn't matter. Maybe you live in a part of the world, a part of the country where you don't come across this, but more and more you will, because people are thinking about it. Okay, the other aspects are informed consent, HIPAA, health information, financial agreement. Those are your 5 main things that you need on your intake. Let's talk about informed consent. It's so precious. It is so important to me. It is crucial to my comfort at work, my comfort in doing body work, that I know that people who are there know what's going to happen and they want that to happen. The process by which people receive information about their care and have the opportunity to ask questions and request modifications and then provide written consent to receive this evaluation and treatment. And I do it in writing and I do it again verbally. And there's a reason why I do it that way, and I'm going to tell you now. I want the patient to receive a form when they're not sitting in my office, when they haven't already driven to see me and committed their time and money. I want them in the comfort of their home, and the beauty of the internet is now all the forms are online. So at their own pace, they're reading, hopefully, my informed consent form, and they have opportunity to say to themselves, you know, I don't think that this is what I want. They cancel their appointment, no problem. Once they're in the office and they're in front of me and they've already committed their time and money, it's harder for them to say no, right? And if there's any semblance of a no, I want to know. I don't want the default to be sure, whatever, okay? So, because I work on skin, and if you're watching my channel, you've probably seen my treatment videos. I work on skin and I ask that my patients change into a treatment gown and shorts. I want them to know that's going to happen before they come in. I don't want them to be surprised, okay? So it's on the form, okay? They sign the form and then they come in and we do the history and I say, okay, I think we need to do these 4 things, and in order to do that, I would like you to put on this treatment gown, open to the back. And sometimes women will say, I brought a tank top. I'm wearing a tank top. Is that good enough? My answer to that question by default is yes. Because the reason they're asking is because that's what they would rather wear. I want them to be comfortable. On the first visit in particular, they're probably going to be more comfortable wearing their own stuff. Great, wear that. In the future, once we've gotten to know each other and you trust me a little bit more or you trust me a lot, then you might be fine putting on the gown. If there's going to be any work around the chest, the buttocks, the groin, as there is in my work, maybe there isn't in the type of work that you do, people should know that first, before they come in. And so they have, again, the opportunity while we're working to say no. So we get the consent in writing, we get it verbally at the beginning of the treatment, and then it's like, okay, we got to work on this piriformis. So I'm thinking I need to access this buttock muscle, and I would want to roll up the shorts. And I would say, patient, I want to work on this muscle, and in order to do so, I need to roll up the shorts. Is that okay? And if they hesitate at all, then we just kind of reset and find out, well, how can we do this? And if it's a yes, great, then we do it. And if at any time, and this is in my paperwork, a patient becomes uncomfortable with what's happening, they just need to indicate to me that they're uncomfortable. And I tell them what I'm going to do. In the paperwork, I say, I will stop, we will reset, we'll find a new way to do it so that we can get done what needs to be done as well as possible while keeping you comfortable. The next thing in informed consent, and we'll look at my informed consent form in a couple of minutes, so stick with me, is the need to know the risks of treatment. Very common after any kind of body work to be sore and maybe to have a little bit of bruising. The difference between a patient saying, I'm sore and bruised, Dr. Russ was right, and them saying, I'm sore and bruised, that so-and-so hurt me, is whether or not I told them beforehand that they might be sore and bruised. Sometimes people get injured with treatment. Any type of treatment carries risk of injury to the patient. I know I'm careful. I know I look for my contraindications. I know I take it slow. I know you do too. But still, sometimes people get hurt, and that is part of informed consent, is letting people know that you might get a sprain, you might get a strain, you might even fracture a bone. We do everything we can to avoid this, but it's possible. If these things happen, it will be painful. It may require treatment. This is what people need to know. Which brings up the very sticky situation and question of stroke with cervical manipulation. I think that it is extremely unlikely for me to injure a basilar or vertebral artery the way that I adjust necks. I listen to everybody's arteries in their neck before I ever adjust their neck. I know about their history, their family and personal history of cardiovascular disease. So I'm making a judicious decision about whether or not to do a neck adjustment. Even so, people need to be informed that it's out there. The current research is that if someone has a basilar stroke after seeing a chiropractor, most likely they had the basilar dissection when they went in because it was causing neck pain, it was causing headache. They go in to see the chiropractor, they get an adjustment, and if things get worse, they wind up in the ER and they have a basilar artery dissection. It's happened. It can happen to you. Put it in the forms and I'll show you my language, and I think you'll agree that it's very fair and it's not going to scare anyone off. And what it says in my form is, you don't need to get your neck adjusted to be my patient. No one is required to undergo any specific type of treatment in order to be my patient. We can modify technique to suit your needs, to suit your health, and to suit your preferences. And it's really important that I say that, and it's really important that we do that. That's part of practice building. Dr. So-and-so really listened. Dr. So-and-so did for me what needed to be done for me. They don't just do the same thing to everybody. It's their body. They're the ones experiencing the treatment. They're the ones experiencing whatever the symptoms are. So they get to decide what to do about it. And they have an opportunity always. You can ask for modifications. You, as the patient, have some control over this process. Okay, it's really important, not just for safety and like legal malpractice protection, but it makes for a better relationship. People trust you. Here's my informed consent form that I use. I'm not going to read it to you. Feel free to pause the video and read it to yourself. I'm just going to point out a few things. It talks about pressure and stretch on painful areas, like what we're going to do might be uncomfortable for you. You might be sore and bruised after. You might be extra hungry, feel a little out of sorts, like take good care of yourself on days after treatment. I'm going to be touching you on the skin. Your comfort and relaxation are tantamount to our success. So it says in there, let's talk about your boundaries. I will honor your boundaries. I will not force you to do anything you don't want to do. Ideally, we may be working around the chest, the hip, the butt. You need to know that this is possible. You have control over this. I also let them know, hey, I'm going to use oil and shea butter on your skin in order to get the glide that I'm looking for. Some people are allergic to shea butter. Same people, there's like crossover with latex allergy, so forth. So here we go to risk of sprain or strain. With all body work, there is risk of injury to the patient. It's uncommon, but it does occur. The most common injury is tearing of ligament or tendon, which may require treatment. And here we go with the stroke. This one I'm going to read out loud. There is a very small risk of stroke following certain forceful types of neck manipulation. That is true. This results from stretch on the vertebral and basilar arteries, which may result in tearing of the artery, which may result in stroke. This is true. This can lead to brain damage and death. That's heavy to put in your paperwork. It's heavy. This occurs in 3 to 4 out of every 100,000 people, whether they are receiving health care or not. So I'm establishing that this is possible. I'm establishing that this happens just in everyday life. I'm establishing that it's not just associated with chiropractic care, but other types of health care as well. And then it talks about the symptoms. Unfortunately, a percentage of these people will develop a stroke. The association with stroke is exceedingly rare, and the statistics estimated to be 1 in 1 to 2 million. You are not required to receive cervical manipulations in order to be Dr. Russ's patient and receive care. And then the person says, yes, I have read, I understand, and I consent to examination and treatment, and there's the place where they sign. That's my informed consent. So the first form is their demographics. The second form is informed consent. The third form is HIPAA, which stands for Health Insurance Portability and Accountability Act of 1996. What does it mean? It means that you must tell your patients about their privacy rights. And it means that their privacy right is basically, this is the one-sentence summary, a provider may not share any information about any of their patients with anyone without that patient's express written permission. You may not share even the identity of a patient or that a certain person is your patient. That is protected health information. Person who lives across the street comes to see you. No one gets to know that they came to see you. That's HIPAA. No one gets to know that they're your patient. No one gets to know anything about their condition at all without their express written permission. But I use a cloud-based EHR system. Someone's administering that database. That person, that whole team of people, has access to my information and therefore can see that my neighbor across the street is my patient. I need the patient's signature on the HIPAA form because one of the things the HIPAA form says is we need to share this information in order to conduct our business. Examples are our practice management software, the people who process our credit card. My front desk person is going to know who you are. Things like, let's say there's a piece of paper with your name on it, even if it doesn't have any specific health information about you. There's a piece of paper with your name on it on my desk. Well, the cleaning crew comes in 3 times a week and cleans my office, right? In order for this sort of business to be conducted in a reasonable way, you need to sign this HIPAA form. Also, importantly, with today's technology, it gives you permission to text them, email them, and call them because cell phones are not always secured. And if you text someone an appointment reminder, that's protected health information. You need their permission in order to do that, and that's going to be on your HIPAA form. Standard HIPAA forms are free, available for download. Get a standard one or find one that's specific to chiropractic. Make sure it's up to date. You need to have a signed one in every patient's file. So we talked about HIPAA, we talked about informed consent, we talked about their demographics. Now let's get their health information. We got their chief complaint. On the intake form, there needs to be some statement of why they came to see you. The intake form doesn't need to be that detailed. You could have more detailed information in other parts of the paperwork, but something about their chief complaint needs to be there. It needs to be detailed somewhere. It's appropriate to confine your intake paperwork to things that are relevant to the work that you're going to do. I have been to chiropractors where they have asked me like hundreds and hundreds of health questions, and it's too much and it's irrelevant. We're going to stick to what's relevant to our work. You may choose to conduct a more comprehensive health history. You may choose to gather more information. I don't. On that intake form, I'm looking for chief complaint and any big red flag contraindications because I know that when the patient comes in, I'm going to be asking them about this stuff. I like to do it more in the interview because I know what questions to ask and I know when to realize the patient doesn't actually know what they're talking about. So, for example, connective tissue disorder is a contraindication, right? Someone's ligaments are super stretchy, their tendons are super stretchy, they don't have elasticity, they're hypermobile. You don't want to do a lot of mobilization and adjusting work on these folks. You can ask someone on the intake form, do you have connective tissue laxity or hypermobility? And they might say, yeah, but really all it is like their elbow is double jointed and it hyperextends or whatever. That's not actually a connective tissue disorder. So that's why I want to ask, because in the interview, we're going to get to the relevant information. What are we really looking for? Cardiovascular issues, okay, so that we know easy bruising, risk of stroke, risk of vascular injury. We're looking for autoimmunity and systemic inflammation because we know that over time those will degenerate ligaments and potentially we might want to be more gentle with those people. We also know that sometimes these folks will have joint inflammation and we want to be able to tell, is this from injury or autoimmunity. So we need to know if a patient knows if they have that kind of a condition. Certainly we're interested in knowing their bone density. That's important for us as chiropractors. And as I said before, connective tissue disorders. And again, I prefer to gather that stuff verbally with the patient where I can really get to the bottom of what's going on, and I put it in the file. If it's in the file where I typed it in or I clicked the button, I'm much more likely to remember it, and that's really what's important than if they were to put it on the intake form themselves. I'm just less likely to remember it. So basic health history, contraindications, chief complaint, demographic information, HIPAA, informed consent, and finally, the financial agreement. So your financial policy should be transparent. Here's why. The number one reason why people complain to the board, outside of boundary violations, which is another video, is they got a bill they didn't expect. They feel like they're being charged unfairly for treatment. I don't want that to ever happen to me as a patient. I don't want that to ever happen to my patients, and I don't want that to happen to your patients. People get really freaked out when they receive a big bill that they didn't expect because it threatens their financial security, and they get really upset about that, and rightly so. So fully explain your transparent billing policies. And what I mean by that is that people should know what it's going to cost, and people should know if they're going to get a bill. If you're billing insurance on the patient's behalf, you need to get a signature authorizing you to do so. Here's why. This is your standard claim form. You may have seen it before, you may not. It's no big deal. You probably never fill one of these out in your whole life because your billing software is filling it out for you. And then this is the form that the insurance company is receiving, either on paper or electronically. And we have this little space here that I'm highlighting for you. And if I blow that up, it says, I authorize payment of medical benefits to the undersigned physician or supplier for services described below. This is what is called assignment of benefits. The patient is saying to their insurance company, pay the doctor, don't pay me. Now, it would not be practical for the patient to sign this form on every single date of service. So we have it say, signature on file. That's what the form says. When the form gets filled out by your software, on this line it says signature on file. And it can say that because you have their signature on file in a place that says, I authorize payment of medical benefits to the undersigned physician or supplier for services described. You need that signature. This is a good time on these financial intake forms, the financial agreement, to remind people that they are ultimately responsible for the bill. People have insurance, they want to use it. Sometimes their insurance doesn't cover it as much as they thought it would. They have a deductible that they didn't know. It's a different deductible for out-of-network, for chiropractic, who knows? They are responsible for paying the treatment. Make sure that you get a signature on that. Now, if this happens to you, and it will, patient thought they were covered, you gave them a bunch of care, they weren't covered. Hello, Mrs. So-and-so. It turns out you don't have coverage. There is a balance on your account. It's $425. How would you like to deal with this? We can take a credit card over the phone. We can break it down into installments. What would work for you? That's the phone call or text or email that you want to send to the patient instead of just sending them a bill. Open a conversation, right? You're going to get your money. And if the patient just decides they're not going to pay, they're just not going to pay. This has happened to me a handful of times over the course of my career. I think the biggest bill I ever had to eat was maybe $2,000, which hurt, but I would rather just let that be than fight with people. We save credit cards, so I'm protected against this. And if you save a patient's credit card, you need to have their signature authorizing you to charge it for balances. So this is our basic compliant file. Every patient has a complete file. Every file is organized in the same way. Every file is complete and accurate. It has their demographic information, informed consent, financial policies, HIPAA, health history, a total Complete SOAP for every visit. All your correspondence is noted in there, all their lab and x-ray is in there, and anytime anyone asks for a records request, you fulfill it promptly because that reflects well on you. If your files are good, they'll protect you and they'll protect your patient. If your files are not so good, it can get you into trouble sooner or later. And let's earn money and stay out of trouble. That's what I want to do. This has been Dr. Russ. Thanks for watching. Hey, if you're new to my channel, subscribe. We're putting up new content every week. There's going to be more like this. I would love to interact with you, so feel free to leave a comment and like the video. Again, thanks for watching. Dr. Russ signing off.